My name is Matt Porter. I'm the Senior Deputy Head here, and I just want to call proceedings to order. Slightly unnerving, the silence you get when you're calling a room full of nearly 100 people to order. It's normally a lot easier when you're an MBT or a chapel or assembly and you can simmer everyone down. I won't go through the fire regulations just in case the fire alarm goes off, but I hope all of you at home know what to do if your fire alarm goes off. So I'd just like to hand over to the head, Judith Fremont-Barnes, who will introduce our guest for this evening, and then she'll hand back to me, and I will hopefully navigate some questions from some of our students and find out a little bit more about Mr. Bigham. Ms. Fremont-Barnes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Porter. Well, it's an enormous pleasure to be here. Of course, we'd much rather be welcoming you to the heart of Milton Abbey School, but here we all are at virtual Milton Abbey, and it's a great privilege and a great pleasure to have with us our entrepreneur in residence this year, Mr. Charlie Bigham. And he's a long-time friend of the school. Many of you may know that he has also served us as a governor, and we're absolutely delighted that he has chosen to spend time this year with the candidates for our Entrepreneur in Residence competition. I have to say it's one of the most exciting things of the many wonderful things that we do here at Milton Abbey. And I'm tremendously grateful to Miss Barton, who manages the competition through the year, and to Mr. Barnes, who have put this evening together, and for all the work that they do to encourage entrepreneurial spirit in our school. Goodness me, if ever it were needed in the world, it's needed now. Without further ado, I'll hand over to the maker of my favourite chicken pies and the one and only Mr. Charlie Bigham.
Hello, everybody. How very nice to be joining you all over the place, I'm guessing. Can you hear me? Just sort of stick a thumb up if you can hear me. That's encouraging. That's encouraging. Most people have put their thumbs up who I can see. Well, it's very nice. It's very nice to sort of be back at Milton Abbey. As just said, I was a governor and I haven't been for a while. I was very much looking forward to coming back and meeting you in person and chatting. But sadly not to be. We've all been locked away now for far too many weeks. But it's nice to get out this evening and have a chance to at least chat virtually to you. So I think what we're going to do here to try and make it, a bit more interesting and not just me talking at you the whole time is I think we've got a bunch of questions that I'm going to answer. And I was given a little bit of pre-warning about the questions, and that's not because I mind answering questions on the hoof. I rather enjoy that, and we might have an opportunity for that at the end. But it has enabled me to dig out the odd picture to sort of animate my response, if you like. And that means you won't have to look at me the whole time. I will give you some breaks and share a screen, and hopefully that will work.
Excellent.
So I'm ready
Charlie,
to go when you are.
So Charlie, I've got the list of questions, and I shall hopefully help navigate between yourselves and the students. And I promise not to go off piste and go a little bit Andrew Marr and chuck some of my own non-prepared questions, I promise. So I think our first question is probably about where you started and some of the inspiration for your business, from Archie.
Hello.
Hi,
What
Archie.
have been your biggest inspirations and motivations to set up your own business?
Okay, well, let me see if a picture works. Okay, let me just see. I have a first little picture for you. Let's see. Here we go. Is that a pic? Can you see me?
Yes.
In a different guise. So this was me in a van nearly 25, in fact, more than 25 years ago, with someone who was at the time my girlfriend, whose face you can just see is now my wife, Claire, sitting next to me. And my original inspiration to set up a business was I wasn't very good at working for other people. In fact, I was pretty terrible at being told what to do because I had my own ideas in life, and so it didn't fit very well with me when somebody told me to, jump on a plane and go to this country or whatever. Because at the time I was a management consultant, and being a management consultant was terribly. Well, I was paid lots of money, and it was meant to be very glamorous, but I didn't want to be told to jump on a plane and go to South Africa at a few days' notice. So instead, I handed in my notice, and Claire handed in her notice as well for her job. And we bought this lovely van, an old VW camper van, and we drove it to India. And in fact, there's a picture of it. Here is a picture of our van, not quite in India, but that is I think that is in Syria, actually. Not a very easy place to visit now, or maybe actually in Jordan, having been through Syria. So we took off our van, and it was one of my great inspirations to set up a business, because as we traveled the world very slowly, chugging along in this van, and we were in the van for about a year as we went to India and back, I came across the most fantastic array of delicious food on the roadside, wherever we stopped. And I thought, goodness, food in England's a bit boring. When I get back from this little escapade, wouldn't it be fun and interesting to start a food business? So that's what I did. And I love food. I love cooking. And so it was a natural thing for me to do, maybe to set up a business in food. And it was also, I think, a natural thing for me to do to set up a business at all, because I have worked out nearly 25 years on that I'm much better at working for myself than I ever was at working for someone else.
So a big leap from vans in the Syrian desert to Zoom surgeries with students at Milton Abbey School.
Well, you know, a very enjoyable journey it's been, both of them.
Freya, I think you have a question.
Yes. So has there been any change in the sort of food people are eating, and have tastes changed in the past 20 years?
Now let me see, I think I've got a picture here. Oh, yes. Here we are. So this is what convenience food used to look like, and actually, very sadly, in some cases, still does look like. But when I was working, having left university, and working in London, working quite hard, I love to cook, and I love buying food and cooking from scratch. But you know, I was working reasonably hard and quite long hours, and like lots of people, I found I occasionally wanted a night off. And at the time, if you wanted a night off cooking, the available food on the shelves in London or across the UK that was sort of pre-prepared and that you could perhaps pop in the oven or put in a frying pan was revolting. And this is actually, I mean, there was many more things that were more revolting than this, but I thought that's pretty nasty. And I thought, well, maybe we could go from this to something a little bit better. And this is a picture of some of our food that we make today. There's a chicken and mushroom pie on the left. That looks like our chicken jalfrezi curry in the middle. And I happen to know that on the right-hand side, that's our very lovely macaroni cheese with some pancetta and breadcrumbs on the top. So yeah, I think things have changed in terms of the food we make, and changed for the better. When I first started, food, especially pre-prepared food, was full of preservatives and additives and horrible stuff. And I think, you know, we right from the word go that we're not putting any of that rubbish in our food. And actually, I'm delighted to see that the whole food market, or a big chunk of the food market, has moved in a similar direction. And now you're much more likely to get a sort of what people refer to as a cleaner ingredients list, so without nasty chemicals and things in. So I think that's a great thing. I think, you know, it's also interesting maybe when we kind of look what's going to happen in the next 20 years, when I reflect on just how much change there has been in the last 20 years, and some of the teachers and parents listening to this will hopefully, you know, agree with me that the change has been quite phenomenal in the UK. I mean, and I guess that many of you who are younger will have not appreciated how far food has moved forward in terms of the availability of things you can get. You know, hummus was an exotic ingredient 20 years ago that was hard to find and eaten by nobody. If your fridge is anything like my fridge, you know, there's always hummus in it today, and hummus is eaten up and down the country. And, you know, the availability of herbs like fresh coriander, they weren't around. And actually, there was very little that people talked about food, or, you know, the newspapers didn't write about it or have pictures about it. There was very little food on TV. There were a couple of slightly mad chefs who appeared on TV, but it was a rare thing. And there's certainly, you know, the very idea of people going out and having a meal, whether in their own kitchen with some friends or in a restaurant, and getting out their phone, which obviously didn't exist then, and taking a picture and posting it on Instagram, which didn't exist. I mean, that is just so different. And I think wonderful. I think wonderful now food has become much more accessible. I think more people enjoy it. And I think we're sort of, you know, I've been very fortunate. I've started my business trying to make better food than was around in a sort of golden age of food discovery in the UK. And I think at the moment, London especially is probably one of the most dynamic, exciting food capitals in the world. And what's really great is food, you know, that sort of dynamism that started in London maybe 20, 25 years ago, started to really gain momentum, is actually filtering out more and more across the country. And I certainly I find I can go to and have some absolutely delicious, innovative, wonderful meals all over the country now. You still have to look a bit, but I hope you find that as well. So yes, it's changed a lot, food, and I think it will continue to change.
Thanks very much, Charlie. Having grown up in the hospitality industry myself, with my parents running pubs for 40 years, I remember seeing this firsthand from the food I remember being cooked in our pub, you know, 40 years ago, my earliest memory, and the food that was being produced by the time they left. Runo, you have a question.
Yes. What has been the greatest challenge you have faced, or the hardest lesson you have learned?
Well, I think that's a very opportune question for the moment, and I've got a little picture. Oh no, that was, okay, a kitchen table is a good place to start. I'll just a little aside there. I put that in because, you know, I think there's an idea, and some of you, because I know that Milton Abbey is a very entrepreneurial place, some of you will already be thinking, gosh, one day I might start a business, and how difficult is it to do that, and oh, it's going to be impossible, and you have to, you know, have amazing connections, and you have to spend huge amounts of money up front. Actually, a lot of businesses, and mine was no different, started from a kitchen table, not unlike this one, with a whole load of clutter, a whole load of other stuff going on in the background, and it's actually remarkably easy to start a business. So I kind of just wanted to say that as an aside. But you do get a few knocks and challenges along the way. And the biggest knock that we had was actually, sorry, I'm going to just skip past that. I might come back to a couple of things there. The biggest knock we had was the financial crisis of 2008. A lot of you were very young there, so won't remember it at all. But I think actually, it was different. But the only thing that is similar in scale is, and maybe surpasses it, is the crisis that we are having, that we're in the midst of today. I'm very fortunate in our business. We make food, it's sold in supermarkets. We have been affected by the current crisis in lots of different ways, but what we haven't seen, which lots of businesses have done, is a sort of dramatic reduction in sales overnight. And as you will know, there have been lots of businesses, especially pubs, restaurants, hotels, airlines, who've literally seen 90% of their trade or 100% of their trade disappear overnight. For us, our big challenge was in the financial crisis of 2008, and this is when the world went a bit mad. And at the time, what that meant for us was our sales. We'd been growing every year at about 20%, and suddenly overnight our sales were minus 40% on the previous year. And so it was a very challenging time, and we had to make a large number of people redundant very quickly. In fact, about a third of our workforce. And it was very difficult. And I kind of think the lesson for me there, and it's one you know, I find as I talk to people today, I am saying to people, you know, when they say, gosh, what have you learned? You've been doing this, you know, you're quite old, you've been doing this for a long time now. And I say, well, you know, when things got really difficult for me, what I learned was you have to be quite decisive. And it's really important, and you have to make difficult and sometimes very unpleasant decisions. It's not a nice thing to do to suddenly make, as we did do, over 100 people redundant. But what I learned is actually, you know, if you don't take decisive action, and you'll hear and read in the press that some businesses are doing this now, and you might think badly of them for making people redundant. But actually, I think if you are running a business, employing lots of people, you're much better off trying to keep the business healthy and look after some, in our case, the majority, two-thirds of the people, by making sure that the business was secure and healthy. And sadly, having to say goodbye to 1/3, but you know, overnight. So you know, it's something I think you have to take on board. If you do end up, any of you, starting your own business, you have to be prepared to make the tough decisions. And when times are very difficult, like they are now, you have to be prepared to act pretty fast.
Let's bring a question back into happier times, maybe. Alejandra, I think you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. People are increasingly conscious about the environmental issues. How important is sustainability for UK businesses, and why?
I think it's a very good question, and I think very relevant to the way businesses all need to run as they look to the future, and particularly as they want to engage with your generation and other younger people. I think it's a really great force for good that younger people especially are demanding that businesses are more more conscious of their role in the wider community and indeed their impact on the planet. This is rather a bad picture, but I just got somebody to take a snap of at work yesterday. As a business, you know, we are very conscious of our environmental footprint. This is something we have up in our cafe, in our kitchen in Somerset. You won't be able to read it, but basically we chart our environmental performance every week on quite a large number of measures. If you can probably make out there's about 12 different graphs. We're measuring on a daily basis the amount of water we use, the amount of power we use, the amount of rubbish we recycle, the amount of stuff we throw away. We don't send anything to landfill. We haven't done that for a long time. We aim to be a very sustainable business. There's a snap taken just last week. So despite the crisis that is going on, we've really striven not just to keep our business open and going. We've been open every day through this crisis, making food, but also keeping some of our key projects going. This was one of our projects which was completed last week, which was putting solar panels onto our roof. It's about £250,000 worth of solar panels which we've installed, and they're going to generate around 10%. They are already generating around 10% of the electricity we use. So I think kind of businesses looking after the environment, very important. One of the things we're extremely proud of, I don't know, I'm hoping that some of you listening have tried our food. Just in case you haven't, and you're inspired to try after this, that's what you're looking out for. And I just put this picture up to highlight that our food is almost all sold in a wooden tray. And you can see here is the wooden tray. It has got some delicious macaroni cheese in as well. But we actually introduced, most of the people we compete with package their food in plastic. Or maybe in tin foil. Tin foil's not too bad environmentally. Plastic, I think, is awful. It's made from oil, as I'm sure you all know. whereas our wooden trays are made from trees. These are sustainably grown trees. So we plant about 6 trees for every tree we cut down, and they grow very fast to maturity in about 15 years. And they suck up carbon along the way. They're poplar trees grown in southwest France. And this year, we will use about 15 million of these wooden trays. So that's 15 million pieces of plastic that won't be being used. So I think, and we started doing this 10 years ago, long before David Attenborough did his brilliant job with Blue Planet of highlighting the horrors of plastic and how we really must learn to move away from it. So for us, environmental concerns and our role in protecting the planet and thinking about the future of the planet are absolutely key to what we do. But to go back to the very good question asked, you know, I think all businesses, if they want to be relevant and around in 20 or 30 years' time, need to grab this one by the horns and do something meaningful and not just talk about it.
Thanks very much. Shay has a really good question following on from that, I think.
Yes. How did you scale your business without losing values, losing like core values?
Thank you very much, Shay. That's one of my favorite questions. I get asked it quite often. And so I've got a little picture here, and you're going to think this is a bit odd, but here's a picture of a bunch of parsley. And I put out this picture of a bunch of parsley because I think if you do manage to start a business and you're fortunate enough, the luck goes with you, and you work hard and you have a good team of people, and you grow and are successful. And I'm glad that we do tick that box. You have some choices what to do with that growth and that success. Some businesses take the short-term view and say, well, you know, I'll just take all of that money that results, that extra profit, and I'll put it into my pocket, and then maybe I'll retire early or buy a yacht, or I don't know what people do. But I think the choice that businesses should make is to reinvest that, reinvest some of that profit back into their business to make what they do better. So why parsley? So when I first started, we were only making meals for about 50 people a day, and it was pretty tough to buy fresh parsley. Nobody wanted to sell it to us. And so if I wanted to buy some fresh parsley, I had to get up early and go down to the market and find someone who'd sell me some parsley. And they wouldn't sell me the best bunch of parsley because that was for their special customers, and I certainly wasn't one of them. So actually the parsley we bought, when we started wasn't very nice parsley. If you roll the clock forward 20 plus years, we don't use, perhaps you would think, huge amounts of parsley in what we do. So our fish pie, which is our biggest selling dish, we put about 2 grams of parsley, fresh parsley, on the top of our fish pie. But we do make quite a lot of fish pies now. In fact, we make about 50,000 fish pies every week. And so what that means is over the course of the year, now just for our fish pie, we buy about 800,000 bunches of parsley. And the nice thing is, and what we haven't said is, okay, let's try and find the cheapest possible parsley. As a result, we're buying lots more. We've said, let's try and find the best parsley and then find out the way that we can get it to our kitchen as quickly as possible. So now our parsley is grown for us by a very nice farmer in Kent who we know very well, and I go and visit and I go and stand in the fields and talk to him about our parsley. And it's harvested for us the day before we need it. And then it's sent to us in a special lorry, and it arrives at our kitchen early in the morning. And then we have 4 people in our kitchen whose job is to cut up parsley, and we have some special machines to cut up parsley, and that's all they do. And so what we've chosen to do is to take our growth and turn it into making our core product, our food, better. And so I kind of think, and that's how actually, as you grow, rather than fall into the cliche of, oh, well, as you grow, things inevitably get worse, I prefer I prefer the virtuous circle. As you grow, you just get better and better at what you do.
Thanks very much, Charlie. I'm salivating at the thought of 50,000 fish pies. You mentioned there that you started serving 50 meals a day, or you were making 50 meals for 50 people a day. I think Alice has got a question that will stretch that a little bit. Alice.
Yes, hi. How did you persuade supermarkets to stock your products?
A good question and a very simple answer. The supermarket that first stocked our food was Waitrose. They're still our largest customer today. And I rang their switchboard. So I just rang their switchboard and said, I've got something interesting. I think you need to see it. And I had a chat with the very nice lady on the switchboard and persuaded her to put me through to the right person, and went in and met the right person, and we were off. So it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. But I think you do have to have a good product that stands out. And we had been, we had put quite a lot of effort into making sure that we had created something new and original and better than anything else available on the market. And I think the other thing is you have to be quite determined and have a strong belief in yourself and what you're doing. I think the kind of interesting follow-on question, which I thought I'd just kind of talk about as well, is sometimes you can kind of do something to get noticed to start with, but actually it can be the more difficult thing to do is to carry on being noticed, and in our case, carry on being relevant and stocked by supermarkets. Because we do live in the UK in an exceptionally competitive environment in terms of selling fresh food. And so if you're not doing something that's relevant and continuing to work, not just you, but for in our case, the supermarkets who we sell to, then you're not going to stay on the shelf for long. So, it's important, I think, always to have something that you're clear about what is unique about what you do versus what other people do. So for us, these are just, a summary of, we make food differently. So, I love food. I love food. I love eating food. I love cooking food. I love tasting food. I love working with our chefs. I'm very involved, and that kind of gives us something different to the people we compete with. Most food is made in factories, and people are trying to make it as quickly and as cheaply as possible. We're not. We're trying to have we're happy to take a risk with flavors. Nothing that we sell, I haven't tasted first. I taste our food that we make every week. So I'm all over it. And I think that gives us, one of the things that gives us an edge. We do, as I talked about with our Parsley, we have a lot of fresh ingredients delivered to us every day. And that's can get quite difficult. We actually have about 480 different fresh ingredients delivered to us every morning from 5 a.m. onwards. And then when it comes to actually how we make our food differently. We make it in small batches, as you would at home, and it's made with pride and care and special attention to detail. I did have a little video here which is about our people, but before we started this, we tried this and the technology couldn't quite manage it. But if you do go into YouTube and you search, if you want to know about people, because there's nothing more important in a business than the people who work there, go onto YouTube and put in Charlie Bigham's. You'll find a couple of videos about our fantastic team, them talking, not me, which is why I wanted to play it, because I thought it would be interesting to hear somebody other than me chatting. This is a lovely lady, Christina, who worked with me for 15 years. She's now retired. But people are everything. And I think a lot of businesses today don't look after their people very well. I think some businesses have taken a wrong turn. And I think it's quite interesting what's happened during this coronavirus. You will have heard this term of people being furloughed, being sent home not to work and being paid 80% of their pay. And I've talked to a few people who've been furloughed. We haven't we've been busy, so we haven't had to do that, fortunately. And I was talking to someone the other day who's been furloughed, and he'd worked for this business. He'd worked for the same business for over 10 years. And when this crisis hit, he was sent home. And he said, I'm absolutely horrified. I was sent home 8 weeks ago, and nobody from my business has rung me to see how I am. I'm sitting at home, not working. Not a single person from the business I've worked for 10 years and turned up every day has rung to see how I am. And as a result, I'm not going back to that business. I'm going to go and look for another job, because what I know now is they don't care about me. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. And I would really like to say to any of you, kind of, if you end up either setting up your own business or being in the position when you're employing other people, just remember that your people are your greatest asset, and you won't be able to run your business without them, and you need to care about them. And then the other thing that kind of keeps you on the shelf, or gets you on the shelf in the first place, is if you're just good at what you do. And it's always, I'm British, and you're not meant to brag if you're British and talk about good things, but I'm proud that we set out, our mission is for our food to taste fantastic. In fact, our motto is, our marketing slogan, if you like, is only delicious will do. And we mean that. And so we enter these awards, the Great Taste Awards, every year, which are blind tasted, so nobody knows who's made it or whatever, by a bunch of people who know about food and love food. And I'm very proud that we've won 52 Great Taste Awards over the last 7 years. And I think that means that actually we're the company who's won more Great Taste Awards than any other. And that definitely helps keep you in the supermarkets, as well as maybe get into them in the first place if you're in the world of food.
A question that's come from the attendees, Charlie, which I think is quite interesting, it's come from Veronica, is how do you feel about using your name as the brand on your products?
It's an interesting one, that, because it was a sort of accident rather than deliberate. The way that happened, I went to a friend of a friend who had a very successful and smart design agency who did me a favor, and I said, look, I'm setting this business up, I don't know what to call it, can you help? And he went off into with his brand gurus, off and sat on beanbags and communed in the woods, and came back 2 weeks later and they said, we've got the perfect name. I said, God, how exciting, that's fantastic, you're so brilliant. What's the name? And he said, well, actually, it's your name. Because, and then they gave me a whole load of rationale for it, because, my name is Bigham, Big Ham. And he said, it's ham, so it's got food in there, and that's good. And then big is positive. And so, there was a whole load of rationale. Anyway, it was maybe because he was doing me a favor that he told me that. So it happened accidentally that the company had my name on, but actually I think it's quite good. And I remember I came to a Milton Abbey lecture, this entrepreneur in residence lecture, the very same one, a few years ago, and Johnny Bowden was talking, and someone asked him the same question, and then he spotted me in the audience, and we had a chat about it. And I think what we agreed at the time was having your name over the door is quite useful, because it really means that you absolutely have to care about everything that goes out of the door. And occasionally, if someone else is proposing to do something annoying, or that, especially if it's going to have a negative impact on the quality of what you're trying to do, you can pull rank and say, look guys, my name's on this, and then everybody listens. I think you've gone silent there.
Sorry, my children were making a bit of noise.
That's right.
You mentioned your 400 plus deliveries every morning from 5 a.m. at your food production centre, and I know Archie has a question about that.
I do. You've recently opened a food production campus near Wells. Can you tell us what kind of considerations go into a decision on where to site a new facility?
The simple answer is, Archie, I can tell you, and I could tell you, if I gave you the list, we'd be here for about the next 3 hours or maybe days, because there's an awful lot that has to go into it. There's a picture of our new building in Somerset. It's quite, I mean, one of the great joys for me of having a business is that I learn stuff, new stuff the whole time. And I love this project because I learned so much. I'd never built a building before. It's quite a big building. I don't quite know how to give you a sense of the size of it, but you know, it's a lot bigger than a big house. It's probably, in fact, if you've been into a cathedral, we're very close to Wells Cathedral, and it's a bit bigger than Wells Cathedral. And cathedrals are quite big buildings. So I learned a whole load of stuff. There was a fantastic team of people who worked with about 20 people working for a year on just the planning stage before we actually started building it. We built it very fast. We built it from the spade in the ground to it opening in 40 weeks. And we had to do more than just build the building because it's in an old quarry in Somerset, and we didn't have any electricity or gas or water or sewage, you know, kind of works to take away the dirty water. So we had to put all that in. We had to build a road in as well. So I learned a whole load, a load of stuff, and it was all fantastic fun. I had to learn about bat flight paths and greater crested newts, and how to build a sewage, how to build a kind of water treatment plant to treat dirty water. We had to put in a planning application, which was 1,200 pages long, involving 20 different specialist reports, from bat surveys to geological surveys to all sorts of things. So it was a really fun project to do, and I worked with a fantastic team of people, some very good builders who know how to build things very quickly and very well, and also a young firm of architects based in London and Bath. And we were very proud to win an architectural award. There's an outfit called the Royal Institute of Building and Architecture, I think, RIBA, very highly regarded around the world, and we won one of their major awards the year we opened, the best building built in the Southwest. So it was a great project, and yeah, you have to think of an awful lot of things when you're undertaking a big project like that. I had a big sort of criteria that we measured. We went and visited about 25 potential sites in the Southwest, and there was all the sort of normal criteria you'd expect, like how much does it cost and how big is it and where is it and all of that. But on the bottom of my list was, could it be magical? And there are a lot of building sites which are for this type of building, which are on the side of roads, which are rather boring, desperate places to be. But we found this old quarry, and it's pretty magical. There's a picture of it at night, and you can kind of get a sense of the quarry setting. We're surrounded by these cliffs, which are over 100 foot high, and we have peregrine falcons flying around, and it's a pretty cool place to work.
Right, let's get some questions back to the food. I think Alejandra has some questions about your ingredients.
Thank you, Seb. Leading from that, where do you source your ingredients for? Do you source locally to your kitchen?
Thank you very much for that question. So we love to buy local ingredients. However, when we're choosing our ingredients to buy, our absolutely #1 criteria is how good they are and how good they taste. So what we like to do is to find people who are really, really good at producing something, you know, one thing. So we talked about our parsley farmer earlier on. Parsley doesn't grow very well locally to us, so we buy it from Kent, not that far away. Potatoes, I mean, the best place to grow potatoes in the UK is a little peninsula on the banks of Killyleagh Loch in Northern Ireland. So that's where we go to. We've got our potato farmer there. So we go to actually the very best place to buy, and then tend to buy it from there. We're lucky in that, being down in Somerset in the West Country, it's a great area for producing dairy. It's the dairy capital of the country, and some people would say beyond just the UK. So, for example, our cheddar cheese, and we use quite a lot of cheddar cheese. In fact, about 2 tons of cheddar cheese every week we get through, and that comes from just 5 miles down the road from a lovely family business called Barber's. If you haven't tried their cheese, I recommend you go and buy some Barber's 1833 vintage cheddar. It's very delicious, and that's the cheddar we buy. And I can tell you, because we buy a lot of it, it's very, very good.
Alice, I think you had another question about food and ingredients.
Yeah, I do. Sorry, I'm just finding it. Okay, so do you still travel around the world to find new ingredients for your recipes?
And new ideas for your recipes, Charlie?
Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant.
That's all right.
I'm very lucky. I love traveling. I've always done quite a lot of it from the time I, was sort of left school. And it's a great excuse for me, running a food business, that I can still go traveling and pretend I'm doing a bit of work along the way. I do travel a lot, and whenever I'm traveling, I sort of seek out markets and restaurants and food stalls and interesting places, and it's a load of fun. If I'm honest, there aren't often ideas I bring back from my travels and into the business. And that's because 2 things really. I spend quite a lot of time in London, and actually you can travel around London, and you can travel the sort of world of food around London. Almost every community in the world is represented in London, and as soon as there's a community, a critical mass of people, someone opens up a little restaurant or a food stall or whatever, and so you can go and taste fantastic food from all around the world without getting on a plane. Quite useful at the moment. Well, when the restaurants reopen, that is. And so, yeah, I do eat a lot when I'm traveling, but not, but I can discover things other ways. And in fact, I think I got a picture here somewhere. Oh yes, there we are. This was some very nice. This is an example of how you can discover about new things. This is a cauliflower shawarma that I had for the first time 2 weeks ago in the middle of lockdown. All the restaurants are closed. A friend of mine who has a food business organized a brilliant virtual banquet, and 2,000 people dialed in, rather like you guys are dialing in now, and watched some of the best chefs in the UK cook up a dish, and then we cooked along at home and sat down and ate it. And I thought this was delicious. This was a coconut shawarma, which was some coconut cooked in a very, very hot oven, so it kind of charred a bit, which had been rubbed in this shawarma butter, this kind of spicy butter, and then we drizzled a bit of tahini paste over the top, and some fresh chopped parsley and some pine nuts, and I think then put a little bit of pomegranate molasses on. I'm starting to feel hungry. It was very good. So I think actually the point is you can actually discover wonderful food, wonderful new ingredients, new recipes, both by going and traveling, to the far corners of the world, but actually also by just keeping your eyes open and looking around close to home.
Charlie, you mentioned how the present situation's been really, really challenging for restaurants. You just mentioned lots of them being closed there, and other businesses. I think Freya has a question about the challenges you might have faced.
What challenges has the pandemic posed to your business, and how do you keep things going?
We have had lots of challenges. we have two kitchens, one in London and one in Somerset. In London, we did have a large number of people who were ill and off work. In fact, at our busiest, I think we had nearly 60% of the team off in 1 week. And it's pretty challenging to keep going when you've got 60% of the team not there. So that was difficult. And then we've had, you know, lots of orders going up and down the whole time. And you know, we have our business is in some ways quite simple, but in other ways, with those 450 fresh ingredients coming from all corners of the UK every day, and if those orders are changing, you know, hour by hour, that creates some challenges for us, because we want to make our food extremely freshly. But we've, you know, I'm sort of pleased to say I've got, oh yes, here's a couple of pictures, so of some stuff that, you know, we've kept going. As I say, we've been one of the fortunate businesses that has been open throughout. But we've also thought at this time it's been really important to engage with our local communities and do our bit, because, you know, this is a proper crisis, as we all know. So this is a curious picture. Maybe this is two people enjoying dinner outside their house. This is we for our local neighbours, both in London and in Somerset, about 3,000 neighbours in each case. We went and delivered a free meal, one of our lasagnas for free, just to give people a break from cooking so they could get out with lovely weather. So we encourage people, if they wanted to put a table outside and enjoy it outside, perhaps with their neighbours as well. And this was nice people sent in to us. And here's a picture of our local hospital, because we have also been giving every week some free food to our local hospitals, both in Somerset and in London. So I think overall, so far, I think we might have given away about 30,000 meals, both to the sort of vulnerable people sheltering at home, and as I say, to our neighbours and to local hospitals. So I think it's very important at you know, what is a really difficult time, that businesses step up, and where they can, and we can, they do their bit to help out as well.
You mentioned that you were down a big capacity in your kitchen in London, and you mentioned earlier about the value of people in your organisation. And a question from one of the people watching was, how do you go about choosing the right people to work in your organisation?
Carefully, carefully and slowly. And I think actually the first thing you have to recognise is that actually it's not just about you choosing them, it's about them choosing you. You know, every interview I always think is a two-way thing, you know, and so we are very careful about when we interview people. We don't get it right the whole time, but we put a lot of time and effort into it, and I'm delighted to say that very often it pays off, and we've got a great team of people.
Shay, I think you've got a question about some of the work Charlie does outside of the food production area.
Yes. You worked with City Harvest, Beating Bowl, Cancer, Magic Breakfast, and Classroom in the Class to work with these organizations.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, I think I got the question there. So we, as a bit, you know, kind of, I have this big thing, and you know, maybe you're picking up that businesses have I think a vital role to play in society, which is sometimes not really talked about enough. They have a vital role to play in terms of employing people and actually generating a profit, which is then taxed, and then that tax goes back to pay for all the essential services that we need as a society. But beyond that, I think businesses have a responsible role to play as part of their local community. So we decided quite a few years ago that we were going to put a percentage of our profits every year into a charitable fund. And I think so far we've given away about £250,000, and we've been able to support a number of projects, so that you have mentioned. We choose our projects based on how relevant they are, we think, to us. So City Harvest is a project which distributes food around London to people who need it. Those are people in homeless shelters, people who can't afford, who've fallen on the hard times and can't afford their own food perhaps. So we do distribute a lot of food through City Harvest, who are a great charity. Beating Bowel Cancer was a charity close to our heart, because one of our colleagues, who was a friend of mine and a great contributor to the business, very sadly got bowel cancer and died aged 34. And so we wanted to help them in fighting a dreadful disease. Magic Breakfast is about giving breakfast to kids who don't have breakfast at home, and there's a link between not starting the day with a nutritious meal and performing badly at school, and particularly for disadvantaged kids, that can have quite a big impact kind of through their whole schooling and later life. And Classroom in the Clouds is a charity in Nepal. I mean, in our London kitchen, we have about 20 lovely Nepalese ladies, mostly, who work with us, a great bunch of people. And a few years ago, there was an awful earthquake in Nepal. And many people lost their houses, and indeed some people lost their lives. And so we wanted to do something to kind of, as a team, we thought it was appropriate to support a Nepalese charity. So this builds schools in distant parts of Nepal. And I think there might be a picture here. As this is another charity we've supported more recently, just in fact last week, called Heads Up, which is a mental health charity in Wales. And Wales, because that's our local city, town, near our kitchen in Somerset. And so we're sort of getting more and more involved in our local community there.
Charlie, I know we need to wrap up as close to 7 as possible, and there's been a few interesting questions come in during the session. None of them big curveballs, I promise you. So if I'm going to fire a couple of them at you not quite quickly. There'd be like a short answer round in a quiz. So Miranda asks, what's the most rewarding aspect of your business?
Oh, it's lovely. We get about 100 emails a week from people just saying, you've made my day special by having a lovely meal, and those are great.
Did you ever cook for the business?
I cook a lot. And I do occasionally wind up our chefs at work by, if we're working on a new recipe or trying to improve something, I might take in a version of my own and just say, what do you think of this? They don't always like it very much because they're much better cooks than me.
I think there's a bit of industrial espionage here. Nicola asks, after the success of Proper Puds, what's next? Where's the range going next? Maybe some spying.
I think we've got a couple more puds in the pipeline, which should be fun. Hopefully we might see those. It takes quite a long time to get new things onto the shelves, actually. So a few months away, but we've got some nice ideas. And actually, interestingly, and people don't realize this or do it enough, what we spend a lot of time doing is actually not doing new stuff, but taking the stuff we already do and trying to make it better.
What's your favorite product in the line?
Very tough one, because we've got about 45 recipes and I'm happy to eat them all. I think our lasagna is actually the nicest lasagna I've ever eaten. It's very good, and it's always a great sort of comfort food. Some of you might have tried our puddings. If you haven't, I absolutely recommend you try our cherry bakewell, which I think is our finest pudding to date.
One of my colleagues was singing the praises of your lasagna just this afternoon. Do you feel a pressure to keep growing as a business and keep expanding?
Not a pressure, but I think you kind of have to make a choice. If you're a business, you're either going to grow or you're going to shrink, because what you're not going to do is be exactly the same size one year compared to the previous year. And if I have to make a choice between growing or shrinking, I'll choose to grow.
What advice would you give someone wanting to start a business now?
I think for most of the audience listening, I would direct this answer. I think it's actually really important, if you are thinking of starting your own business at some point soon, maybe, is to go and get a job with someone else and to kick things off. And in getting a job with someone else, I actually don't think it matters what you do, but what you should try and do is find someone who's doing what they do really well. So kind of find a company that is excellent. Now, it might be an excellent art gallery, it might be an excellent gym, or it might be an excellent bank, or it doesn't really matter. But what it's really useful is early on, you get exposed to what good looks like, because I think that you can put that into your own business. And the other thing I would say on this front is, if you have your own business, it's a really good idea if you set up a business in an area that you're interested in.
Emma and James have both asked questions about the plant-based, vegan and vegetarian markets. Are you looking to expand there like the rest of the world?
We have expanded quite a lot there already. 2 years ago, we had 1 vegetarian recipe. I think today we have 8. That's 8 out of 40, so that's quite a high percentage. And we're selling a bit of vegetarian food. Vegan food, I'm a bit skeptical about vegan food because we're all about taste. Only delicious will do for us. And I find it quite hard to find really delicious vegan food. But my team of chefs at work have said that they're going to show me some delicious vegan food in a few weeks. So I'm looking forward to it.
A really interesting question here from Nikki. Who does the artwork on your packaging? Because it is very distinctive.
It is very distinctive, and it's a very fine illustrator called Emily Sutton. She does quite a lot of work and all sorts for books and things. So if anyone wants to find out about more of her work, go and type Emily Sutton into Google and you will see a whole array of her work, and she's a lovely person.
Charlie, it'd be very remiss of me knowing that you've had a few Zoom surgeries with some of our pupils today, and knowing quite a lot of our pupils in the audience, just to ask you, how was it doing the Entrepreneur in Residence surgeries with our pupils and their business ideas today?
I much enjoyed it. I had some lovely chats with, who did I have some lovely chats with? With Tabby, with Izzy, with Veronica, and with Amy. And they've all been working hard with great entrepreneurial ideas. And I thought there's some really impressive things we talked about. And I'm sure amongst them, there's at least one, and probably more, budding entrepreneurs who in a few years' time you'll be hearing about, because they'll be doing fantastically well.
Charlie, it's gone 7 o'clock, and I think you probably had another engagement this evening. Do you need to wrap it up there, or can you handle a question or two, literally one or two?
How about we just have 3 questions and then finish there? Is that okay?
Fantastic. I'm going to go back to my pre-prompted group. Freya, do you have a question?
Yeah. How can today's educators best prepare pupils for the world they will enter?
There you are, Charlie, a big one.
A big one, and obviously I'm talking with an awful lot of experts listening on this one, in the form of teachers. Those are the experts I was thinking of. I think 4 things. 4 things I'd say. Ability to think. It's really, really good. You know, all of that work you're doing at school is worth it. It's teaching you to think, and as you go on to university, just learning to think is great. I think it's really a good idea at some stage for all of you guys to go and get a job in the service industry, go and work in a restaurant or a bar or whatever, because the vast majority of businesses in this country over the next however many years are going to be in some ways service related, and it's really good for you to understand what it's like being on the other side of the bar, so to speak. Be adaptable. The world is going to change faster and faster, and always believe in yourself.
Very nice.
if people can teach you to do those 4 things, I think you'll all fly.
So leading into a question we've got from the floor from Amy, what's the most useful skill when you want to start a business venture? Just maybe pick one. If you could pick one.
Determination.
Very nice.
Never give up.
And you run a well-established business going since 1996. At what point do you start thinking about where the business goes without you? And I don't mean without you in a morbid way. I mean, succession planning and where it's going to go when you want to take a back seat.
I think I'm thinking about that already, not in terms of necessarily me not being there, but in terms of making sure that our business is relevant and sustainable in some of the ways we've talked about earlier on this evening, so that it has a relevance, and it has it should be there, because no business deserves to be there just because of past success. You've got to always be thinking about the future. So I like to think with a sort of, where should the business be in 10 years time? I don't think enough businesses do that, actually. Most businesses are short term in their thinking.
Well, Charlie, that was 3, but one question came in right at the beginning that I've been holding off. What was the dish you pitched to Waitrose? The very first one.
Well, I have a picture of it here, so I better put up the picture because it was up here earlier on. So it's the first dish we sold in the first packaging. Apricot Moroccan lamb, fresh lamb scallops, lightly marinated and ready to cook, complemented by a fresh yogurt, spring onion and mint sauce, accompanied by apricot couscous, freshly battened carrots and fresh green beans. It was pretty good.
Well, if anybody in the audience is lucky enough to be about to eat that or anything close to it, good luck to them. Charlie, it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, I don't know how the audience feels about sessions like this. It really, instead of being in a big auditorium, it really does feel, Charlie, that you're here in my house with me, talking directly to me, and it feels very personal. And thank you very much for that. And I think I speak on behalf of the other 100 or so people here, just saying thank you very much for your engagement with our students as well today. But thank you very, very much for the time you've given us this evening. Thank you for the boys and girls with their prepared questions and the questions we've had on the Q&A as well. It's been really fabulous, Charlie.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all very much and have a lovely evening.
Thank you. And I think I'll leave it to Mr. Cloak to close up the meeting, or the webinar, or the virtual lecture, whatever you'd like to call it. Thanks very much.
Okay, bye now.